Ever get that feeling like you're hitting a brick wall when you're trying to make a point?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Or close a deal? Or even just convince a friend to try something new and bam, hard no.
Like talking to a wall sometimes.
Right. Today, we're diving into objection prevention so we can avoid those frustrating
It
moments.
sounds useful.
Totally. We're going deep with sales expert Jeremy Miner and his 7 levels of sales masterclass.
Miner's approach is really interesting because he actually blends sales with psychology.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just like those, cheesy sales lines.
No, not at all. He helps us understand the psychology of why people object.
So we're going beyond just handling objections. We're figuring out how to prevent them altogether.
Yeah, you got it.
I'm already intrigued. This feels universally applicable.
It really is. Whether you're in sales, leading a team, negotiating,
We're just trying to, win an argument with your partner.
or even that, yeah. Understanding the psychology of objections can be a game changer.
Okay, so let's get into it. What actually causes people to object?
Well, Miner breaks it down like this. Objections, they're not random. They're triggered reactions.
Oh, okay. Almost like a reflex.
Exactly. Something happens and boom, objection. What's really fascinating is that some of these triggers can be super subtle.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so something as simple as your tone of voice can trigger an objection.
Yeah.
Like if you sound monotone,
Oh, yeah.
or if you sound like super salesy, like you're reading from a script.
Ugh, yeah. It's like instantly I don't trust you.
Exactly. And it's not just your words either. Body language plays a huge role too, even on a video call.
Oh, interesting.
Things like your posture, your facial expressions, those can unconsciously influence how the other person perceives you.
So it's like our brains are always looking for those subtle cues.
That's it. To decide if we feel safe or not, and if something feels off.
Like if you sense pressure or inauthenticity.
Yeah, exactly. That's when those objections, those kind of pop up.
So how do you avoid triggering those objections in the first place? What does Miner suggest?
Well, one of his key concepts is what he calls framing. He explains it like this. Everyone has these internal rules,
Oh, okay.
almost like mental shortcuts that we use to make decisions.
Huh.
These frames, they're shaped by our experiences, how we grew up, even our culture.
Okay, so like internal scripts we're all running.
Yeah. So if someone hits you with that classic objection, like, I need to talk to my spouse,
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
what's the frame there? What's going on in their head?
They probably feel like they need permission to move forward.
You got it. Maybe they always defer to their spouse for certain decisions.
Okay, so the frame is there. How do you prevent it from becoming like a full-blown objection? Do you just ignore it?
No, not really. Ignoring it could make things worse. Miner suggests this two-step process, deframing and reframing.
Deframing and reframing. Okay. Break that down for me. What exactly does that even mean?
All right, so first, you deframe the existing frame. You got to gently expose its limitations.
So like poke holes in their logic a little bit.
Kind of, yeah, but gently. So if they say, I need to talk to my spouse, you could respond with, that's understandable. How does your spouse feel about the problem you're addressing?
Ooh, I see what you're doing there. It's sneaky.
Right. By asking that, you're subtly suggesting the spouse is already part of the process.
Not just a gatekeeper, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're not directly challenging their frame, just nudging them to see a different perspective.
Okay, that's the deframing part. What about reframing?
So then you replace that old frame with a new, more positive one.
Yeah.
Instead of them seeing themselves as needing permission.
You're positioning them as like the decision makers, taking charge.
Exactly. I love that. It's so much more empowering than battling a negative objection. You're helping them shift their perspective.
Yeah, to one that's more open to solutions. You mentioned this isn't just for sales, right? Like, how would this deframing and reframing work in a leadership role?
Oh, totally. Imagine you're leading a team and there's resistance to a new strategy. Someone says that classic line, we've always done it this way.
Ugh, the worst.
Right. To deframe that, you acknowledge their experience. You say, I understand this is how we've done things and it worked well, but...
Oh, the world is changing. We need to adapt.
Exactly. You validate their concern, but introduce a new perspective. You're not just shutting them down.
That's a great example. Okay, so we've got the psychology, but what about the emotional side of things?
Oh, yeah. We're not robots, right?
Right. Surely people aren't making decisions just based on logic.
Exactly. Miner dives deep into that emotional stuff, and what he reveals is people buy to avoid pain or fear.
Whoa.
It's not just about being convinced logically.
This is where it gets juicy. Give me some examples. How does he illustrate that pain and fear thing?
He paints these vivid pictures. He talks about the pain of a business owner who hasn't taken a paycheck in a year.
Oh, wow, that's rough.
Right. You can feel the weight of that. It's real-life consequences, not just numbers.
Yeah, and those hit hard emotionally. So if someone is feeling that level of pain,
They might be more resistant, yeah, even if the solution makes sense logically.
totally. And then on the flip side, he talks about the fear of future pain.
Exactly. Like what happens if that business owner keeps doing the same thing? They might work 70-hour weeks, miss out on family time.
That fear of things getting worse can be a big motivator.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So how do you tap into those emotions in a way that's, ethical and effective?
That's the key, right? Miner says ask the right questions. Not just any questions, but questions that emphasize now.
Okay, interesting. Questions about now, like what?
He calls them neuro-emotional persuasion questions, or NEPQs for short.
NEPQs. Okay, sounds a little intimidating. But what are they exactly? And why are they so effective?
Well, in a typical sales conversation, you ask questions to get information, right?
Right?
NEPQs are different. They're designed to go deeper, to trigger that emotional response,
Hmm.
get the prospect to feel something.
So instead of asking, what are your biggest challenges?
You might ask, how frustrating is it when problem keeps happening?
Oh, okay. So you're making them feel the immediate impact.
Exactly. It's not just some abstract challenge out there. It's happening right now.
I like it. It's so much more impactful than just talking about challenges in general.
Right. And another great NEPQ is, what happens if nothing changes in the next 6 months?
Ooh, that's good. They have to visualize the consequences of delaying.
Exactly. It gets real.
Yeah.
Now, what about those classic objections?
Oh, yeah. The ones that pop up all the time, like, I need to talk to my spouse or it's too expensive. Does Miner have any magic for those?
He does. For the spouse objection, he says, address it early. Ask, how does your spouse feel about the problem?
Oh, so you're not waiting for them to bring it up. Clever.
It accomplishes two things. First, it acknowledges the spouse's role, builds trust.
Makes them feel included.
Yeah. And second, it subtly positions the spouse as likely agreeing with the solution since they're concerned about the problem.
That's brilliant. You're getting ahead of it and reframing it as a shared concern. What about the too expensive objection?
Yeah. Miner's strategy for cost is, don't reveal the price until you understand their needs fully. Frame it as dependent on variables.
Okay, so instead of saying it costs X dollars.
You might say, it depends on factors related to their needs. Once I understand your situation, I can give you a clear idea. Would that be helpful?
I see, I see. You're not dodging the question. You're making them want to learn more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Shifting the focus from price to value.
I love it. Okay, we've covered so much, the psychology, the emotion strategies for those common objections, but I have a feeling Miner has more up his sleeve.
Oh, there's more, definitely. We've got to talk about those neuro-emotional persuasion questions, or NEPQs, and something called identity framing.
Ooh, identity frame. Okay, I'm hooked. Let's dig into those. Okay, so we're back and ready to dive into these advanced objection prevention techniques from Jeremy Miner.
Yeah, buckle up.
We left off talking about neuro-emotional persuasion questions, or as Miner calls them, NEPQs.
Itchy. Right.
They sound pretty powerful, though. What are they exactly?
Well, think of them as questions that, make people actually feel the problem, not just understand it in their heads.
Okay, so it's about getting them to connect with it on a deeper level, emotionally.
Exactly. And the way you do that is by emphasizing the now.
The now.
Yeah. Like instead of asking, what are your biggest challenges, which feels very general.
Yeah, kind of distant, too.
Right. You could ask, how is the problem impacting your business right now?
Ooh, I see. That subtle shift, it creates a sense of urgency.
It does. It makes them confront the immediate consequences, Like, hey, this isn't some theoretical problem. This is happening to you right now.
Let's deal with it. I like it.
Another good one is, what happens if nothing changes in the next 6 months?
Forces them to visualize those negative consequences of just like standing still.
Exactly. Makes it real.
Those are really good. I can see how those would be effective in, a sales situation. But do they work in other contexts too?
Oh, absolutely. Any key cues are super versatile.
Okay, good. So let's say I'm trying to convince my friend to finally go on that trip we've been talking about.
Yeah, the one you keep putting off.
Haha, right. Would an NEPQ work there?
For sure. You could say something like, if we don't book this trip soon, how disappointed are you going to be when everyone else is posting their vacation pics?
Ooh, that's good. Taps into that fear of missing out,
Exactly. Makes it more tangible. So yeah, NEPQs, add those to your communication toolkit.
Done and done. Okay, so then what about this identity framing technique? You mentioned that earlier. What's that all about?
Identity framing.
Yeah.
It's all about aligning your message with the person's self-image.
Okay. So
Uh,
like how they see themselves.
yeah. You're helping them see themselves as the kind of person who would take action to solve the problem.
So you're appealing to their sense of identity.
You got it. Miner talks about two types, positive framing and negative framing.
Okay, so two sides of the same coin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With positive framing, you might say something like, you strike me as someone who's really proactive, always looking for ways to improve. Would you say that's accurate?
So you're affirming their positive qualities and then suggesting that taking action aligns with that.
Right. It's like, hey, you're a go-getter. This is what go-getters do.
Love it. What about negative framing?
With negative framing, you're kind of highlighting the bad stuff that happens if they don't take action.
Okay, so playing on those fears.
A little bit, yeah.
Hmm.
For example, you might say, most people who don't address the problem end up feeling stuck and frustrated because they were afraid to make a change.
Oh, okay. So it's like, don't be that person. Take action.
Haha, exactly.
Right.
But the key with both is to be subtle.
Right. You don't want to be like overtly manipulative.
Definitely not. It's about guiding them gently towards a decision that's good for them.
I'm starting to see how I can use these in different areas of my life, not just like at work.
That's what's so cool about this stuff. It's applicable everywhere. But, even with the best tools.
You can still mess it up, right?
Oh, for sure. One of the biggest mistakes, Miner says, is sounding scripted or robotic.
Ugh, yeah. Like when you can tell someone is reading from a telemarketing script or something.
It just kills the connection, And I think it's even worse now with chatbots and AI. We can spot those canned responses a mile away.
For sure. So how do you avoid sounding like a robot? Any tips?
Miner says it's all about those natural verbal bridges. Like, instead of just repeating back what the person said,
Oh, okay.
you might say, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Or, I see. And how long has that been an issue for you?
Those little things make the conversation flow more naturally. I'm totally guilty of just like rapid fire questions sometimes.
We all do it. It's easy to get caught up in our heads. But those bridges, they're important for making the other person feel heard.
That makes sense. Okay, so sounding natural is key. What other mistakes do people make when they're trying to, put these objection prevention techniques into practice?
Another big one is being too pushy. We've all felt that, right?
Ugh. Yeah. Someone trying to hard sell you on something.
Makes you run in the opposite direction.
Totally.
And it's not just sales. It can happen anywhere you're trying to influence someone. The harder you push, the more resistance you get.
For sure. So what's the alternative?
Miner talks about a pull strategy.
Pull instead of push. Okay, I like that.
So pushing is all about forcing your agenda, telling them what they need and why.
Do this because I said so kind of thing.
Right. Pulling, on the other hand, it's about creating curiosity and desire, making them want to learn more and figure things out themselves.
So it's more like enticing them with possibilities.
Exactly. Instead of saying, you need to do this, you might say, have you considered this approach?
Oh, that's good. It's subtle, but it's way less confrontational.
Right. It's a big difference in how it's received.
I love it. It's empowering. You're giving them the agency to choose, but also guiding them, towards the right path.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance. That's what separates the masters of persuasion from the pushy salespeople.
It's a fine line. This has been so insightful. I'm starting to rethink how I approach conversations entirely, like in every part of my life.
That's the cool thing about Miner's approach. It's not just for sales, it's for anything. Whether you're dealing with a difficult coworker.
Trying to, get your kids to clean their rooms.
Even that.
Yeah.
It's all about influence and understanding the psychology of these interactions.
Well, I feel like we've covered so much. We went deep on the psychology, talked about these advanced techniques like the NEPQs and identity framing.
Yeah, we've been through a lot.
Should we wrap things up, do a quick recap, and maybe share some resources with our listeners?
Yeah, let's tie it all together and give them some takeaways they can actually use.
All right, we're back. My brain is overflowing with all these objection prevention techniques.
It really is a lot to take in, but the cool thing is you don't need to master every single one.
Oh, good.
Just start with a few. Even implementing a couple of these ideas can make a big difference.
Okay, so for our listeners who are ready to put this into practice, let's do a quick recap of those key takeaways from our deep dive into Jeremy Miner's masterclass.
All right, so first things first. Remember those subtle things that can actually trigger those objections.
Like our tone of voice, our body language, even how we frame the whole conversation.
Exactly. And like we talked about earlier, people are always kind of scanning us for those signs of trustworthiness, right?
So if we sound pushy or fake, or if we accidentally trigger one of those negative frames,
That's when you're going to run into resistance.
it's like we're putting up walls without even realizing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
So be super mindful of how you're coming across, both, what you're saying and how you're saying it.
are you building trust? Or are you kind of shutting people down?
Right. And then there's that whole concept of deframing and reframing, which is so powerful.
I love that technique. It's like instead of fighting against someone's beliefs, you kind of gently nudge them to see things differently.
It's so much more effective, and it works in so many situations, not just sales.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. It's like if you've got a team member who's resistant to a new idea, or even like if you're trying to convince a friend of something.
Or your kids. It's like that classic, but mom, everyone else is doing it.
Oh my gosh, yes. Deframing and reframing could be a lifesaver with my kids. Okay, so we've got the subtle triggers, the frames, and then of course we can't forget about the emotional side of things.
Oh, for sure. Emotions are huge.
Because people don't make decisions based on logic alone, right? So we've got to tap into those feelings.
Those feelings of pain and fear, but ethically, of course.
Yeah, we don't want to be manipulative. And that's where those NEPQs come in.
Those neuro-emotional persuasion questions. They get people to actually feel the problem, not just think about it abstractly.
Okay, so to recap, we've got those subtle triggers, we've got deframing and reframing, we've got the emotional drivers, and we've got those powerful NEPQs. Oh, and we can't forget about identity framing.
It's a lot, but it all works together.
So before we wrap things up completely, where can our listeners go to learn more from Jeremy Miner?
His YouTube channel is a gold mine. It's called 7 Levels of Sales.
Perfect. I'll link to that in the show notes. Listeners, seriously, check it out. He posts new videos all the time and goes even deeper into all this stuff.
If you want up your communication game, Jeremy Miner is the guy to learn from.
Couldn't agree more. So, to wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave you with this. How could understanding these techniques change how you approach not just sales conversations, but any conversation?
It's really about thinking about the psychology behind every interaction.
Yeah. How can we use these principles to build better relationships, resolve conflicts more effectively, achieve our goals, with more confidence?
Lots to think about.
Definitely food for thought. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of, well, whatever topic we decide to nerd out on.
See you then.